All right, welcome. Happy Thursday, everyone, to our Armchair Botanist Forum. Today's presentation is From Pressed Plants to Pixels, 2 Ways Community Scientists Document Plant Diversity. And today is even extra special because today kicks off the worldwide weekend-long digitization event. We Dig Bio. So we are participating. So any specimens that you help transcribe with us this weekend will go towards that effort. So it's not just you guys transcribing this weekend. People all over the world are transcribing natural history collections, which is really exciting. I think I saw an update. Australia, they got kind of a head start on us, but they're already up to like 18,000 already in Australia transcribed. So we're excited that this is the way that we're kicking off the weekend. Today's presentation is going to be given by Kimberly and Tiana. And I think I don't have the controls for the PowerPoint, Kimberly. So if you want to click to the next slide. So this program is a collaboration among botanists, museum professionals, students, biodiversity, and traditions, and you. Whoa, words. These casual forums will serve as a space for questions and discussion on our current herbarium digitization projects and for dissemination of botanical knowledge from both presenters and attendees. For any further questions, comments, or critiques not addressed here today, please reach out to our email right there, herbarium@brit.org. So just to kick off today, since we've got our regular transcribers on with us, is there any pressing questions you have on any specimens that you've transcribed lately since we've last met? Any questions? Has transcription been going pretty well so far? These Texas specimens? And I'm assuming if there's no questions, then that means that they're easy peasy and they've been going really good. I will say that we are getting close to, so the specimens that you guys have been helping us transcribe for Texas have been skeletally transcribed. There have been a collector name, number, date, scientific name, country, state, county. So you guys have been filling in the remaining information such as the locality and habitat, plant description, etc. We're getting to a point where the rest of the records to transcribe don't have the skeletal data. So I will make sure to give you guys an email heads up whenever the specimens in the queue will need to be looked at a little bit more carefully and for all that information to be entered. So that being said, I will hand it off to, I think, Kimberly, or maybe Tiana's going first. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Ashley. Y'all, this is it is really nice to see everyone, and I just lost everyone's face, so let me change that so I can see all of you again. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Ashley. Did that magic behind that. So I'm glad to see all of you. I've missed being on and getting a chance to see you, but I do promise more content in the future. But today's talk, I hope, the beginning section that I'll be talking about is information that most of you already know, but I'll just set a little bit of the framework for what we'll talk about, and then the real showstopper, Kimberly will take over and discuss. And I know that y'all will also have experiences that we'd like to hear about. But from pressed plants to pixels, 2 ways community scientists document plant diversity. So who are we talking about in this presentation? We're talking about botanists, naturalists, community scientists, and you. And the what and the why behind this, biodiversity and why it's important. I think each one of you already understands that. The fact that plants form that foundation of the food chain, arguably, I suppose, in some ways. And really that understanding our biodiversity will help us conserve it. But knowing what we have and the kinds of treasures we find in our specimens and around us becomes so important. So releasing those data to the world are the role that y'all are playing in transcribing specimens with us as armchair botanists. Kimberly, will you go to the next slide? So the things that we're going to be talking about are those 2 ways. And the 2 ways specifically we're talking about are herbarium specimens. As you can see on the left, you're looking at one specimen, Jessica Lane sorting specimens, and then down the middle of the herbarium. And then on the right-hand side, you're looking at photographs, geotagged and dated photographs. So some of you are probably looking at that picture on the far right and noticing that it's probably something you might have seen in your area recently. So this is previously in the genus Orobanche. It is now in, I think, the genus Felipanche. Is that right? And that is an INAT observation, I think, that I posted a few years ago. The next slide is, so what we're actually going to talk about today are briefly herbarium specimens. You'll know what they are, so we won't spend too much time on them. And iNaturalist photo vouchers. And then really the meat of it is going to be how those are complementary tools to study plant diversity. And you're going to hear from Kimberly about various case studies that really show how important it is. And that the more people we can get to start recording data in that form, it really helps all science. For those of you, y'all are in touch with us, but independent study for more about herbarium specimens and engaging with them, consulting your local herbarium, y'all might not have seen that resource listed before. Index Herbariorum, which is listed in parentheses there, is a global registry of herbaria around the world. So if you Google that, which is shorter than the URL, looks like somebody might have put it in there, you can find other herbaria around. And then iNaturalist photo vouchers, of course, iNaturalist and Weedig Bio we'll talk about again later. I think the next slide. So herbarium vouchers, y'all are very familiar with this one. You might even recognize the collector name on that label that was enlarged over there. Southlake, Tarrant County, Kimberly Assassin's collection of Vicia tetrasperma. So herbarium specimens, right? Collect the plant, identify it, record the where and when, and note those distinguishing characters on the label, which is where I know a lot of you have gotten really excited about seeing collector labels, because our collectors, including ourselves, all have big personalities, and you can see those come out in our labels and what we choose to record. So the value, this is another organization I think we've talked about in the Armchair Botanist Forum before, and it's from an organization called Spinach, the Society for the Preservation of Natural History Collections. It's not just about plants. It covers animal hides, ethnographic collections, all sorts of collections, but we call it Spinach fondly. So I like to think that it leans more towards botany. But this is from their website and talking about why collections matter. You may have seen this list that I've put up here before, but specimens allow us to provide data points to allow us to address things like economy and trade, changes over time, quality of the environment, public health and safety, as well as many other unanticipated uses. And y'all have also seen that specimen on the right, which was a collection from John Muir, which is pretty spectacular in our holdings. And then, of course, iNaturalist. So actually, I'm curious, have y'all, how many of y'all have used, haven't used, how about that? Because I suspect you all have used. How many of you haven't used iNaturalist? If you're willing to let us know. All right, well, I hear silence in the room and I'm not monitoring the chat, but I suspect, yeah, it's low. So y'all see the value already. So you'll be excited to hear about some of the case studies. But, the idea behind, right, these iNaturalist vouchers, just in the same way as herbarium specimens, they are some object or entity that is accompanied by data, signed by data about that existence, right? Herbarium vouchers, we are documenting that in the form of the actual plant or a member of that actual population is being preserved. In iNaturalist, we are documenting that the data we're recording is an image. And Kimberly will talk about all the important things about these iNat vouchers and how that pushes science forward, how it complements what herbarium specimens are. You will never, well, right? You'll never be able to sample a image of something, but there are many types of data that can be collected from in situ fresh images that may not be visible or available on a preserved specimen. So I'll leave it at that. And then, so here's a nice comparison table put together about voucher specimens versus voucher images. And just to look at them kind of in a comparative apples to apples sort of manner. So your voucher specimens, your plant material is effectively preserved forever, right? So it's organic material, but if we can keep it cool, keep it dry, keep pests away from it, and then keep it away from the light, then it will last a really long time. Versus your voucher images, this is material that can be, as long as we translate technologies, can be preserved over time. You are able to take many, many different images and not worry about damaging the future propagation of a population. So non-destructive. It's a passive form of documenting that data in there. Voucher specimens, they can be thrown, damaged, lost away, just like images. I was talking about that kind of data translation or that technology translation over time. So there is that worry. Voucher specimens, they go back hundreds of years, right? I mean, voucher specimens go back to the 1500s when this was really started as an applied systematic methodology to study plants. The voucher images, that's a much newer technology. So, and the pairing of that voucher image or of a geotagged image with data or with a specimen. Now that's kind of even next step in some ways. It's people are already doing it. We're trying to do it as well. Voucher specimens, very limited to who was in the know and who has the finances and privilege and ability to actually make these collections. Voucher images, it's, kind of the same thing. You have to have the privilege of having a cell phone camera, having access to the internet. But you see, it is a much more accessible form of recording data. And because it is non-destructive, it means that the fallout from that kind of data collection is limited, right? There are fallouts, but which I don't think we'll be talking about today, but they are limited. Voucher specimens, the nature, the fact that they've gone back hundreds of years means that those localities are often very vague. They're very vague or they're incomplete, because the more complete picture is denoted when you look at the field logs of some of these historic collectors, accompanied by the physical specimen with its label. Voucher images, particularly iNat, which is what we'll be talking about, iNaturalist, georeferencing is automatic. Although, we can talk about that too. So I think that concludes the kind of section I was talking about. Did y'all have any questions for me? Because Kimberly's going to take it away after this. All right. Wonderful. All right.
Thank you, Tiana. Appreciate it. So I want to share with you about a couple of cases that I have researched myself or worked on. The first one is Triodanis species. I think I have talked with you about this before, or at least mentioned it. You guys know that I love Triodanis. It's my favorite, the Texas Venus's looking glass, or Venus's looking glass flowers. There are 7 species, 2 of which are endemic to Texas. And it's a beautiful flower, but it's very difficult to tell one species from the other by just looking at them. The flower itself looks the same, but the distinguishing characteristic is the seed, or as you can see in the smaller picture here, in the fruiting capsule, there's a pore or an opening, and that pore is different in location and size in the different species. But if you don't know that, when you're looking at it in the field, they all look the same. Everyone generally looks at the flower itself. So this is something that I was fascinated with when I learned about it, and became more fascinated with the flower, and really just had to deep dive into it because I started finding the other less common species. And it really became a flower dear to my heart. So as I started looking more and more into it, I had more people asking me how to identify it. And I actually got connected with some researchers that were looking at it, also from Illinois. And they were wanting to go collect data, collect species from Texas, because Texas has all of the species here. and they were coming down from Illinois and wanting to go visit different locations. And they were using herbarium data. And you can see on the left, one of the screenshots that I pulled shows 11 specimens had georeferenced data out of 166, which is not very much. So it'd be very difficult to go visit 11 out of 166 sites and hopefully find anything. And on iNaturalist, if you were to look today, there are 117 observations of this particular species, which gives you a little bit more pinpoint locations. And the nice thing about iNaturalist is that you can message people and say, hey, I'm headed to that location. I'm looking for that particular species. Could you give me any more information about where you found this particular flower? Because I'm interested in it. We want to go look for it and collect it. And people are very excited to find out that they might have seen something unique and willing to help. And a lot of times more excited to be a part of the research project too. So we had a lot of experience that season traveling across Texas and using the iNaturalist data in conjunction with what we had found from herbaria specimens to try to pinpoint where we were going to visit to find all of the different species. And I wish I had a map to show you where we actually ended up. It looks nothing like this. We ended up in some pretty obscure places and found all of the different species that we were looking for, so much so that they actually didn't have to come back to Texas, that they spent the rest of their seasons now looking outside of Texas, which is pretty great. But on the right, you can see this is the graduate student that I worked with. Her name is Taylor Simmons. This is her collecting in the field. And one of the things that she was studying was the flowering times and other plant phenology. And we actually used data from iNaturalist to sort of guide us in where to go and when. So she contacted me and said, when is a good time for us to get together? And I said, you know, your guess is as good as mine. I live here in Texas, but I don't know when they're going to flower any better than you do. And that's when we started thinking about, let's look at iNaturalist. We can look at herbarium specimens, but what was flowering in 1850 is not necessarily what's going to flower in 2023, or in this case, 2019, when we were actually looking. And so we used the data that was available to us online, and that sort of guided our exploration of Texas. And that was how we were able to collect as much as we did, because we were in the right place at the right time and had the data from iNaturalist to help us with what we were looking for. And then all of the specimens that we collected did end up in herbarium collections at the end. So you can see here is a sample of one of the collections that I made of Triodanis perfoliata, the clasping Venus's looking glass. And I've expanded my label so that you can see the information that I put on the label is very similar to the type of information that you have in iNaturalist. It collects all of the same data of when and where I was at, the details of the plant that I might not have included otherwise, like that it was growing in a disturbed, overgrown area. I took pictures of that habitat so that scientists could see that. And I'm actually able to link that to the herbarium record. So all of these images are available in the herbarium record, as well as the image of the specimen itself. And then one final outcome of that was I was able to put together a chart of how to identify the different species of Triodanis. So this has been really fun to give that information back to the community now of what I have learned from the project. And so on a community science level, I have shared this on iNaturalist and have a journal post about how to identify the different species. And then Taylor, on her graduate studies, has written research papers about the flowering times and how they have changed, and how climate change has affected that, as well as there's another graduate student that has come on into the project since then, and she's looking at pollinators and which pollinators are utilizing these flowers since they're so incredibly tiny. And then there's a couple of other students that are looking at other projects in the future too. So they're giving back to the science community at the same time. So it's great that we're working together and not just on a one-off kind of thing. So this has been a great project for both of us. And I'm so pleased that they reached out to me to work together on this. That has been such a fulfilling project. And then the second one that I worked on is with someone that many of you may know, Dr. Russell Pfau of Tarleton State University. Anemone caroliniana is another one that is a favorite flower of mine. He noticed one of my observations, which you can see here. The anemone that we commonly see is Berlandieri, and on the stem, it is usually hairy below the bracts. And if you see my thumb in the picture, the bracts are the leafy looking, I was going to say appendages. I don't guess plants have appendages, do they? The parts that are just below my thumb are the bracts, and then below that on the stem, you can see in this case, it is mostly not hairy. It is pretty bare. And that is significant of caroliniana, whereas Berlandieri is pretty fuzzy looking. And prior to Russell and I getting together, there were no collections on iNaturalist of this information and of this caroliniana species. No one had seen it. And if you had looked in our barrier records, there were certainly hundreds of collections. So scientists were aware of it, but the community scientists population was not aware of it. And so he sort of brought that to my attention and said, hey, we've both seen something, and let's sort of dig into it a little bit further and see how widespread this species is. Is it very hard to find? Is it easy to find? Are we just missing it because it looks exactly like Berlandieri? And what's the deal? So we started our own little bio blitz and communicated with some of the naturalists on iNaturalist and some of the master naturalists in our area, and got together a group of people and sent them out into the DFW area and said, go out to any kind of sandy area. And this black and white map on the right is this sand map. And if you see a sandy area, that's where you're more likely to find caroliniana. We had discovered through our own investigation, and then backed that up with scientific data, that caroliniana likes the sandy soil and Berlandieri is more of the clay soil. And so typically around lakes and things like that, where it's sandier, you'll find caroliniana growing. And even in cemeteries, that was one of the places that we targeted, because there's not a lot of, I know you guys love cemeteries just as much as I do. There's not a lot of treatment for weeds or insects or anything like that. So it's a great place to go look. And even the soil types can vary in one location. So we were actually finding caroliniana and Berlandieri in the same cemetery, but in different soil types on one side of the cemetery and then on the other. So that was kind of interesting that they would grow close together, but never never intermingled at all. But so on the left side here, you see the comparison that we put together for our BioBlitz, where we tried to explain what to look for and give people some idea of how to tell the two species apart. And then the colored map is where we had everyone sort of target a spot to go look for it. The purple spots are the ones where they were actually found. The gray spots are the ones where they were confirmed to not be found. The yellow are spots where we still need to go look, and the blue are where we've looked and found Berlandieri, but we want to go back and look again for whatever reason. So there's still some question. So we kind of stepped away from this in 2019 and took a different approach once we realized that this was fun and exciting, but then there was something more on the horizon for us. So just to throw some numbers at you, in 2018, when Russell and I started talking, there were a grand total of 4 observations. I think 2 of them were mine, 1 was his, and another was from Suzette, who has now moved to South Texas. But hers was from Mansfield. So they were all in the DFW area, and it was just a great coincidence that we had found Caroliniana, and we're all interested in it. And so we worked together on this. And in 2019, we had, after this BioBlitz, we had 46 observations with 15 different observers and 19 different locations, which was outstanding. We were thrilled to have found, I think we went from 3 locations to 19 different locations by us just getting out and going from mostly cemeteries to parks and things like that, looking for different spots where it could be occurring. And now you can see in 2023, as of this moment, we have 152 observations just this year. And so it's taking off 86 observers. It's just outstanding. And we're not doing any kind of BioBlitz. This is just from word of mouth. And then the information being available online, and of course Russell doing all of his talking and sharing the information with each other, and curating observations on iNaturalist, I think has been a huge target for keeping this alive. And so let me show you, for me, something that I've kind of taken a little pride in here. I was looking online for observation or specimen vouchers of Anemone caroliniana, and I came across this 1814 collection from Elliott. It has no collection location or any other information other than it was collected by someone named Elliott in 1814. And then Lindheimer in 1843 collected one. It was damaged by water, and then they made some repairs, and so it's in an envelope. You can't see it. But then even Reverchon, 1873, and they've done some repairs, but you can see even the flowers are still intact on his observation. And then there's me, 2019. So I am among some pretty great people there, and happy to have my Anemone caroliniana in the collection. And then one absolutely wonderful thing that has come out of this anemone study that Russell and I have done is that Russell went off on his own to observe every one of the anemone species that he could find. And he actually did observe all, I think that there's 7 of them. He observed all 7. I'll just say he observed all of the species at one time within a week period across Texas, and then has discovered, and I will say that loosely, it's not confirmed yet, but he is working towards describing this new plant as a new species, we believe, loosely referring to it as pilosis, because it is so incredibly fuzzy. And you can see the plant itself is fuzzy on the scape or the stem. It's fuzzy above the bract, it's fuzzy below the bract. And in the smaller picture, even the achene is incredibly fuzzy compared to the other ones. And this one seems to be located in the Panhandle part of Texas, which is kind of unusual too. That's not a common place for anemones in general. But so that's something else that we're really proud of, is that this research that started out as just something, hey, let's see what we can find and prove on iNaturalist with some community scientists. And then look at what it's turned into. It's done some great stuff for Anemone caroliniana and potentially found a new species. And we hope that he'll be publishing that really soon. And so now I open it up to you guys. If you have comments or questions, we would love to hear from you.
I've seen the Berlandieri quite often in parks in Waxahachie, so it must like, the dirt there.
Yes, it is
Early
quite
spring.
common.
Early
Have
spring.
you? Yeah, and I think that it's easy to spot Berlandieri because the fruiting capsule enlarges, and even after the petals have fallen away, you can see that fruiting capsule just standing up in the wind. Windflower is another one of the
Windflower.
common names for it. Yeah,
And
and
almost
go ahead.
never anything else is up at that point in time.
Exactly. Yeah. And in Anemone caroliniana, it does not have that enlarged fruiting capsule the same way. It does not enlarge to the same degree. And so there's some question as to how it's actually propagating. And it has rhizomes that Berlandieri doesn't. So there's a bunch of different differences to it and how it behaves, but soil is definitely one of those unique features of it. So yeah, you would definitely see a bunch of the Berlandieri in parks. Very common.
Kimberly, as you were curating these images that other people had posted, how did you find it was quite frequent they didn't photograph the stem below the bract so you could?
Yeah, most of the time people like to take pictures of just the flower. And it took me a little while. I may be a little bit more cavalier than Russell about saying, oh, I can still identify this just from the sepals, let's say, where he might not be quite that. He was a lot more conservative and saying, no, we need to see, below the lower part of the scape on it. And I would say there's things that I could tell from that part, from the top part of the flower, that are unique enough for me to identify it, where he would be more conservative. So there are things that that he and I approached differently, but we still kind of got to the same results. And then, of course, educating the communities about what really is needed for a good identification helped a lot, because then once we started getting pictures of the stem and below the bracts was fabulous, because then there was no question. And so there was no, me going out there being wild and crazy with my IDs.
Kimberly, I had another question. You referred to, the diagnostic tools that y'all put online, the the keys or the guides to the keys, and you mentioned a kind of a blog. I don't use iNaturalist as much as I should, and I push it more than I use it. So I need to match what I'm, suggesting people do. But how does somebody find that?
That's a good question. So if you go to iNaturalist and type in a person's name, for example, if you were to type in my name, let me see if I can switch over to.
Yeah, if you can share your screen, I think that'd be helpful.
Yep. Whoops.
That's fine.
Oh, it doesn't want to let me do that. Let's. Oh, I can't see. Here we go.
Kimberly, it's small on our. Oh yeah, perfect.
Can you see now?
I can.
Okay. So if you were to go type in a name, let's say if I said to you, it's in my journal post, then you would type in my name Kimberly TX if you knew it, or you could type in my full name, Kimberly Sawson, and go to About. And then down here, it has journal posts. And it will bring up all of my journal posts, and you can scroll through them. And you can see I've got journal posts about all sorts of fun things.
This is a function I have never used of INAT. I've utilized and visited, but myself personally have never put together. I don't know. Do y'all use, the rest of y'all on the chat, y'all use INAT? Do you use this journal post function? I'm seeing Lisa shake her head, and I think I saw you shake your head, Sue.
No.
I think it's I would definitely see a value in Sue using it for her ultraviolet photography, for sure. I think it's something that there are pros and cons to it, of using the blog, the journal feature, one of which is it's kind of like a blog, so you can post something there. The neat thing is that it's out there, anybody can see it. The downside is that you pretty much have to tag who you want to see it and share that information. So for example, on this Triodanis chart that I did, it's a great way for me to put it somewhere. And then every time I ID Triodanis, I refer to this chart. If you have questions, here's a link back to the chart. And that gives a static link so that people can always go back and refer to it, rather than me trying to explain every time how I got to this ID. So that is wonderful. And what's happened then is now other people who are identifying Triodanis are also referring back to this chart and this journal post. And so that's super, because that's a static link. It's now getting shared quite in many other places. The downside, though, is that there are some really interesting things out there that I post about that sometimes nobody sees. And I think this would be so exciting if, you know, if it were to really take off and 2 people saw it, you know, and so it happens that way. It depends on how many followers you have as to who sees it. And I just say, get comfortable tagging people and just say, FYI, wanted you to see this, and then tag everybody you know, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And people will often leave comments and say, hey, that's great, I'm following you just for your blog posts. I wish there was a way just to follow or your journal posts. But I don't do things too often. I do recommend, if you're not already following Sam Kieschnick, Sam Biology.
I don't know him. I noticed you can click, if you click on community, you can get to journal posts. I didn't see a way to search all journal posts, but you can kind of like see who's been journaling.
Right. So if you click on that, it will take you to the most recent journal post updates. And so you can kind of browse through whatever people have been posting recently. So this is worldwide. So you can kind of see, it's definitely a little tricky if you can read Cyrillic script and who knows what else. And sometimes people use it for their own journal. It's like a field journal, so it's not meant for everybody else. But Sam Biology is one, and then as I mentioned, Russell Fow, he is PFAU_Tarleton. And if you go to his page, he has a whole bunch of links about the things that he's really interested in, which is a ton. And he has kind of taken over lately, posting about bioblitzes across Texas and things like that. So a lot of great information for him. But you can see he has 65 journal posts.
Kimberly, there's a link that Sue put in, and I agree with Ashley, but we're making you put your money where your mouth is. So if you open up the chat, you can click on one of Sue's specimens. And if you click on view large image, I'm not sure if that's easy for you, or I can share if you want me to share, but I think you could, oh, there you go. Yeah, large image. If you click on view large image, it'll let you maybe zoom in a little bit more so you can see the scape. Very.
Yes, I think you got it right. Berlandieri. It does have some hair on the lower part of the scape, which probably would have been more evident in situ. And the leaf shapes are consistent, where in Caroliniana, there are some that are very pointed and almost angular shaped. And this one is fairly early on, because in Berlandieri, the top part of the stem will elongate, and then the flower will get taller and the petals will fall off. Great job. Woohoo!
That was March. And the trees weren't even out. It was the only thing that was up, except for Picara was up.
Yes, they are one of the early ones.
I was just looking to see how many I had posted, and I know I've got more photos, but I haven't been able to do much of that for months to put my photos on. So I got to get busy.
You know, have y'all been contacted by researchers about certain collections or species you've documented in INAT?
No, I've contacted them.
Very good.
I'm going to be on the hunt for a tree when I go back to Big Bend and I go hiking. So,
well, hopefully this is a reinvigorating. Well, tell us which tree.
it's was it a special oak tree? It's the one that was in the articles. It's been almost a year ago.
Oh yeah.
So, your
Tardifolia.
Your specimens there actually said which trail and how many miles or feet off the thing or something like that. I think that might be the area they looked in. But the thought is, if I'm down there often enough and I know what that little ecosystem looks like, then when I'm in a different area hiking, look for that same ecosystem, because a lot of them are very remote and there's a lot of areas nobody can get into. If you read the book Death in Big Bend, they talk about the people who rappel off the areas, and some of them didn't have rope long enough, and I know that was over 600 feet. And they got into a bit of trouble. Some did not survive. So anyway, there's a possibility it's still there. And I was in contact with somebody in Mexico about it. But also I was looking up something else. There's been a long debate about where did Cabeza de Vaca really travel? And there's a particular pine nut that he describes. And the pine nuts where the Texans want to claim that he was, they're harder and they're not as easy to eat or anything. And he's describing something very easily it's very soft. And there is a species of that along the border, I think, but inside Mexico. So that was something I was looking up, and I need to go back and finish that research for a paper I was going to write. So, oh, I didn't hear you.
I said, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I think, the thing is, we can follow these people historically that kept journals that were not really meant to necessarily be for anything but historical, we can follow what they're talking about that they ate or they saw and possibly locate very much the avenue that they were down. I mean, in the book, he talks about the pecans, gathering pecans, which would be high in protein, the tuna from the prickly pear and harvesting that. And it was just sort of fascinating, you know, when you look at the foods that they're eating, where did they travel, whatever. I mean, was it in the Roman times when they were in England, they've gone to where basically the loo was and inspected what they deposited there and plant seeds and stuff. So there's a possibility you find out what plants were really there and where people were walking.
And I think that's even just adds to what the today's talk is about, and kind of this extended specimen network, and how, you know, specimens alone are great, image vouchers are great, them together is great, and even any more additional information that can just add more data, like you said, field logs, etc., books, journals.
I'd like to start typing the journals, because it's very hard to read these people's handwriting. You have to read it frequently to understand, oh, I'm seeing that letter in a word I recognize. Now I can find it and figure out what that other word was. You know, it's sort of like doing a hangman, because I've transcribed letters from 1918 and even their handwriting. I don't think I could deal with 1700s. I've seen their handwriting. It's like, oh my gosh. Plus, it's not only that, the words are misspelled compared to today. And so.
All
I
right, sorry,
was going to say, I went and looked at the Lindheimer one. I didn't see where they noted where the location at all was on that specimen. But when you pulled up the map, and it had Oklahoma on it, I was like, there are some of those spotted in a place I know very well. It's the far north western towards the Panhandle. I knew somebody that lived up there, had a big ranch, and I had visited, so I was like, oh, I wonder if that's close to Moreland. And one of them was close to the Great Salt Plains, which it's interesting. The soil would be a little bit different.
the more records, the more you can kind of pin down what the pattern is and why. No, I think that's wonderful. And actually, this is the perfect time to talk about INAT, because I think many of you perhaps participate in the City Nature Challenge. So this is happening in 2 weeks, next week, 2 weeks. Okay, it's happening in 2 weeks. We'll put the message in the chat maybe, or I will in a second. But the City Nature Challenge is happening, and there's lots of great bioblitzes going on many places. You know, a lot of people value what is put together for bioblitzes, but we were just talking to somebody the other day about how, although bioblitzes are wonderful, it's one moment in time and lots of data, it's that regular or other, you know, individual records that you make when you're traipsing around on your own explorations that become also very useful.
Well, notice that they also hit during the sort of a peak blooming season, which people are more interested in blooms than they are to wait for the seed and other things. My yard is completely bare right now. We moved in March, and we're going to see what comes up. I've noticed some of it has got to go. And in the barefoot grass area, I have some area that's reserved for that, but the rest of it is going to be for whatever pops up or I throw the seed down for. So we'll see.
I like that, a barefoot grass area as opposed to
yeah. I need a little area that I can walk barefoot in and feel the grass between my toes like I was a kid. But I'll have to send you some pictures. I live on 0.6 acres now in town on a corner lot, and it was bowl shaped, like half the bowl and the rest of it broke off at the street. So we had to do a huge excavation. The first time they removed the soil, which was more like rock, I didn't know anybody who would take it. 100 loads. And it was in the big trailers with the lift. It wasn't in a dump truck. So they couldn't hold as much as a dump truck. But the first set was 100. And I know we were well over 100 more to remove. And so I've got a flat area at the top and then it comes down sharply. And I've had to put in terraces. So we'll see what's going to happen.
Well, that's for interesting microhabitats.
Yeah. And the front yard, of course, the deer will come. Luckily they live over across a road where it's fairly wild, although there's some things over that way. So they eat over there mostly. But I've paid attention to what people put out that they weren't eating, and I already knew quite a few. And so those are the only plants that are in the front. So Copper Canyon daisy, if you know the Esther Lauder perfume, especially ladies that like to bathe in it practically, that is the smell it gives off, and they will not eat it at all. That's the one thing they never ate of mine. They will say that they won't eat Blackfoot daisies. They'll pull, if there's small ones, they'll pull them out with their mouth and then they'll spit it out. And I'm like, thank you. They say they won't eat, was it lantana? I've seen them go around and suck off the blooms like they were just the flowers, because they don't want the leaves. They're rough, but they'll suck off those flowers, those blooms. And we've had rain down here, and I'm sure there's plenty of rain lilies. They're like a vacuum on those. If you can reach the yucca blooms, that is the best candy in the world. They love it, love it, love it, love it, and they'll eat that. So we're due to have a fence for the backyard. It was supposed to be in already. This started this week, but it's going to be next week. And the things that I want native that they eat, I put in the backyard, so they can't get it.
That's a smart thing to do.
No treat for them. No.
And I did want to let y'all know, because there are a bunch of, so like Ashley mentioned, there's a bunch of Weedig Bio events going on. And while everyone's, trying to recruit people to transcribe, they're also trying to put together some cool programs. So there's two additional programs that are up on the screen. So like Ashley said, it's a 4-day event. You're here right now at the 12 o'clock one at Britt, but they're doing a whirlwind tour of California herbaria. So that's at 2. You have to register for it, but if you go to that weedigbio.org website, you'll get a chance to, you can see the link to register. It's just, you scroll down a little bit. So that should be really great, because California herbaria have been digitizing the material, and they just should be a really excellent one. And then tomorrow, I think it's Austin Mast out of Florida is going to be giving a presentation on why dig bio, major motivations across scale for digitizing biodiversity. That one's at 2. I think that's also a registration-based one. So if you want to attend that one, go to that same Weedig Bio website. And then lastly, if you are a registered volunteer here at the garden, then you'll already have gotten this email. But we're basically, Kimberly and I will be giving a similar presentation in the morning this coming Saturday, followed by kind of workshops on how to INAT and how to transcribe using crowdsourcing and Symbiota. We figured, there are 600 names on the volunteer list for the garden, and there's a lot of them that don't know what we do over here in this building, because a lot of them are more familiar with our living collection. So we wanted to provide it as an event that people could learn about what we do here. So we're giving a tour. I'm telling you all of this because y'all know all this information already, but we did market it just to kind of the volunteers on site, or not on site, but the volunteers that are registered with Britt in the garden. But if you have a friend who's interested in kind of these kinds of things, we're happy to have them. So we just need to know that they're coming, that being the big thing. So you just email herbarium@britt.org if you have any colleagues and friends in the Master Naturalist program or wherever that kind of want to know about both INAT and herbarium specimens. They could come on that Saturday, and it's 9 to noon, but we'll probably, based on attendance and how things are going and group sizes, we may actually end early, but it'll be a 9 o'clock kind of lecture and tour of the herbarium, and then 10 o'clock hands-on workshop. Did I cover that correctly, Kimberly? Yeah, okay. That's okay, Sue. If we don't get anyone, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for putting that in there.
It's a long drive for us.
I understand. And I do want you to know that we have been talking in the herbarium team. We haven't set dates yet, but we have been talking about weekend events for inviting a bunch of people up here for project-based service or whatever, and maybe educational as well. So we'll keep you posted on that.
A mounting class on Saturday would be good for us.
I can do that. Okay.
Because we're off collecting stuff and drying stuff, but normally I would teach people how to mount in the, some weekend in the fall.
Okay.
But if you guys could do that, then that's easier for me.
I'll do it. We'll do it.
Okay.
Just maybe let's get dates together. If you send an email to me and Ashley, we can get a date on the calendar.
Yeah, later on in the year when we've got enough stuff dried to bring up the people who are collecting.
Okay. Yeah, we would love that. If you want to actually mount your own material here, you would have to give it to us ahead of time so we could freeze it. So,
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
yeah, but I can, since we're close enough to one another, I can come retrieve it from you and freeze it ahead of time.
Okay, well, we can talk offline about it.
Sounds good. So I have another slide. Just a reminder of where you can find all the information. I promised Ashley that I would put there, that we would put this in, and Kimberly put it together. So this is where you can find all this information about what's going on. And now I haven't heard from y'all. We have 1 minute. How is it going with crowdsourcing? Because the last time I've had a chance to be here and talk to y'all, how is it going? So? Okay.
You know, I had an injury and I haven't been able to do anything hardly on the computer since October. So it's finally somewhat healed. If I don't go out and do too hard of digging in the rock, I'm leaving that up to somebody else. And so
Okay.
maybe later in the summer, if things start blooming really good, I'll take some photos of, I don't know, I didn't take any before, but there were a lot of construction photos. So I'll show you the mess that it was, and maybe it'll be improved by the end of summer. Let's hope.
That'd be great. It's interesting. I kept thinking when Kimberly was talking about cemeteries, I just kept thinking of, we need a blog post series called The In-Between Places, and put together, specimens from these in-between places like cemeteries. And the more I talk about it, it sounds interesting. So keep an eye out for in-between places, because that sounds like a fun piece.
On the national news, I think it was last night, they had something about this super bloom that they're getting in California because of the rain. So they were interviewing, well, they had little clips from different park rangers and such. So
actually, I know we need to close because everyone's leaving, but you brought something up really great, Lisa, is that I don't know if all of you are aware, but this August, we will be hosting at BRIT the TIPSY conference, the Texas Plant Conservation Conference. It is a great conference. I don't know what attendance is going to look like. Yeah, we'll see what attendance looks like. But if you're interested, registration should open coming up soon. And the connection piece here, before we say goodbye, is that Naomi Fraga did a news piece on the super bloom and how to protect it. And they're talking about closing certain areas to protect some of these super blooms. And Naomi Fraga is the keynote speaker for that conference. So it should be pretty great. So
where do we get the information?
If you go to our website and Google TIPSY 2023, and I put that in the chat just now. And in fact, let me just see if I can't, sorry, all right,
how many, is it 1 day or
2 days?
2 days, okay. I have to see.
Tiana? Tiana,
hi.
Hi. I just wonder if anyone else has been having trouble with the pictures or the specimens loading. Am I the only one with my internet connection or something? Because I was going real good for about 30 minutes today, and then it just like the picture just spins and spins and spins.
Sometimes the server that hosts those pictures is down or weird or something or another. They don't tell you when they're doing maintenance.
Yeah, and Linda Jo, our images are stored on different places. So I would say if you're seeing it as a consistent thing with then it's likely to be your internet connection. But if it's kind of sporadic, exactly like Sue was mentioning, then that's probably a server issue on the Torch side or on wherever the images are hosted.
Okay.
So try different times of day and see if you
Okay.
experience the same problem.
Yeah.
So back to the super bloom, the newscaster was saying, apparently these seeds rest in the ground and can come up all at once. And I was like, I think we know about the seed bank, but apparently there's a lot of people that don't. Well, they should know because they get weeds that they thought they eradicated, you know, in their lawn. So where do you think that came from?
That's a good analogy. All right, we're going to close this off in a sec, but before I do, I want to let y'all know that the link is in the chat right now.
Okay.
So pop over to there, or you can, if you forget, Texas Plant Conservation Conference called Tipsy. There is not any sort of excessive alcohol consumption, but we do just fondly call it Tipsy. It's a great conference. Oh, and I'm sorry, one very last thing, and then I am actually going to close it, is we have a position that is open at our organization right now for somebody to work in our conservation program and with our seed bank. So please pop over to our employment page. You know, we want to share that job application as widely as we can. And it's really lovely to see all the faces and the names that I haven't had a chance to talk to y'all in a while. Linda, Joe, and Susan, it's really great to see y'all too. And thank you for everything y'all are doing.
So I was going to tell you, since you mentioned seeds, Bill and I did a, what is it? We reviewed a presentation that A&M is putting on the rangeland plants about seeds and seeding and all this. I have to find out the information from Megan. I don't know if they've got it up online yet, but we went through to make sure everything was spelled right, all the links worked, and that it made sense, that it really correlated to what we've learned. And so, and that if it said the picture on the right, that matched the picture on the right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'll have to check with Megan Clayton down at, she was down in Kingsville. I think she's up at Three Rivers or George West right now.
That's
So,
cool. Yeah, I would like to hear about that.
Yeah, I'll put that on my list of things to do. All right. Well, we'll see you another day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Mm-hmm.